it's important for us to share what we've been able to uncover and put together and understand that we've been talking about in the past conversations. The last one we talked a lot about the scapegoating of different figures and how that was done, and maybe today we can expound upon that a little bit more and also talk about why that was done and to what end.
Exactly. That's I think very, very important to try to clarify that.
Once you see it, it's very, very obvious, but the way that it was done in subtle ways where they took these real historical figures but changed different things and put some things in the Bible that weren't true and took things out that they didn't want moving forward to conceal them from people. And so it really is an evil genius way to do it, because if it was all fictionalized, it would people would feel that and know that and throw it all out. But if it has enough truth to it to hold on to, then that makes it trickier to sift out what isn't true and what was left out.
You know, what I wanted to show also is in those terms that the word that came to me was that there is a method to the badness, you know, in it. There's a method to what was done, you know. Um, even you know exactly what you say, and that you know they would use the real thing, you know, but then in a twisted way.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. It isn't just, oh, an innocent mistake or something that was just by mistake misinterpreted. This was an intentional plan to do this. And I think because the incarnation of Jesus and his work and teachings were so powerful that there was no way to conceal it completely. There had to be this concerted effort to conceal it in plain sight, I guess would be a way to put it.
Also, I think even going further, I think they literally use the whole thing, but then in the upside down. So
But
you know what I
that's what I
mean?
mean. It was a plan. This wasn't just, oh, people didn't understand, or this was intentional, a plan, and like you said, a method to doing this, to use it fully upside down. So instead of the real teachings of helping people recognize their own shadow and learn how to carry it, the cross, turning that fully upside down and teaching people how to project and how to gaslight and how to blame everything on everyone else, and using Jesus and the apostles to do that as the foundation.
If you look at Peter, we spoke about Peter last time, and Peter being one of the big three scapegoats, you know, together with Judas and Magdalena. But mind you, Peter being the foundational stone of the church, you know, being painted black in the sense of, you know, the scapegoat, but then also made a misogynist
Mhm.
figure, you know, which is cutting off the shadow, the feminine. And then also the upside down crucifixion was literally showing, you know, that in symbology, you know, that they were using an upside down version of Peter, you know, which was meticulously done together with the so-called denials, you know. So the foundational essence of the Vatican Church became misogyny of the
Mhm.
feminine, which is the shadow, and also, you know, what maybe not today, but what we need to get into eventually is how it basically became a recipe for the upside down crucifixion, because the real message was, you know, to the right side up crucifixion. So they literally turned the whole thing upside down. Yesterday, very coincidentally, somebody sent me a video of a program in which this guy who was I don't know if he was a priest or not, but he was sort of criticizing the church heavily. And then they made a video of him, people from the church, and he invited them to his program to sort of, you know, have a conversation about it. and it went all over the place. But he was saying how the church is manipulative and it's has misused its power and all of that. But I think what we are doing now is not just stating that. We are like showing the very method.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So how was it tweaked and changed, to what end? But methodologically, there was a method to this. And the method was, exactly what you said, to teach people to gaslight instead of contain their projections, because that's exactly the opposite of the true teaching of seeing the splinter and the beam.
Mm-hmm.
And then to move that towards an upside down crucifixion, which would be, when you fully separate the opposites, then you go upside down. So then, if you wish, it becomes the very formula to a upside down marriage of the goat, which is not the marriage of the lamb, would be people who've reached self going into that deeper connectivity with the selves. And then the goat would be, that upside down marriage based on the upside down crucifixion to be like the birth of an upside down self, an anti-self.
Well, I was going to say just about the upside down crucifixion in and of itself, just that story about Peter, it doesn't make sense. Someone who's being held prisoner, that he gets to choose which way he's going to be crucified. That's the story that they put in the Bible, that he chose to be crucified upside down because he didn't feel worthy to be crucified in the same way as Jesus. But someone who's being held as a prisoner who's about to be crucified doesn't have the power to choose which way, which direction he's going to be crucified. That doesn't make sense. Like when do they someone on death row, okay, you get to choose which way you're going to die? No, the state says it's by lethal injection. That's what it is. The prisoner doesn't have that kind of choice. So even that doesn't even make sense. And that was part of this narrative, part of this scripted story, to put upon Peter that feeling of not feeling worthy and not feeling good enough, and make him carry that, because that's a painful feeling to have to carry for oneself. And so we talked last time about Jesus incarnating in a body was the recognition of the shadow, and teaching people about the shadow. And then when the shadow comes up, the individual shadow, there are feelings and things that are uncomfortable and unpleasant, and this was an answer or recipe in how to find ways to not have to feel that or carry that, which is the exact, as you said, the exact inverse and upside down of the real teachings.
And that, so you see, so this is why I believe that what we're bringing forward here is not just general critique and the inner structure of what we're saying is so, it so fits with because we're bringing it basically from a depth psychological perspective, right? And so it all is very tight in its inner, how everything sort of adds up and fits together, and at a certain point people will start to see that this is way beyond a few coincidences.
Mm-hmm.
This is not just like, oh yeah, okay, so there's an upside down crucifixion and then there is misogyny and there is no, when you really listen and you go through all of the material we've produced, so far, and also, my stuff individually, what I've tried to put up there in it, which is like just to jumpstart this, you will see that there is a very structured method here, which is like people will get somewhat shocked, at what we have, but what we are saying is you here. They forged a fully upside down picture of him and made him into, mind you, I just want to say this also. obviously they turned Peter upside down because Peter in the right side up is the rock, is the foundation. It is his true function. You know what I'm saying? It's just, so this is the way it was done. It cannot be done. They do it because they take the real thing and they turn it upside down. Because if not, they would have nothing to go on. You know, they couldn't make this up. So they took the real function of Peter, you know, and they turned it, and but then they play with it in a way, you know, that, you know, it looks like it's the real function, but it's really, you know, because how could you ever legit, I mean, for instance, we make all the apostles males, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we make Peter into a misogynistic apostle, and then we you know, and then the whole church ends up excluding all women
Mm-hmm.
from, you know what I'm saying? It's like there is no way that that is just random
Yes.
coincidences.
And again, it doesn't make sense because Peter was one of the only apostle to walk on water with Jesus, and walking on water would symbolize containment and being in the self state. And there's no way that someone could hate women on the outside while containing their shadow on the inside. It again, it doesn't make sense that someone so close to Jesus and knowing these teachings, whom Jesus entrusted to give the keys to watch over the sheep, there's no way that it would be someone who truly hated women. But there are numerous so-called quotes and conversations and things in the Bible where supposedly Peter is saying things about, I'll have to look up the exact quotes, maybe we can put them in the video, but you know, where he supposedly was saying either that he hated women or they don't have I think it was, do you remember? I think it's something like they don't deserve to live or something like that about all women. And there's no way that someone so close to Jesus and really understanding the true teachings would be that way and then be entrusted with these big responsibilities.
That's exactly it, because things need to add up, you know. There is a, you know, real life, things need to add up, you know, things need to make sense. And this is why, you know, we're looking at a world that has gone upside down, where nothing is adding up anymore, you know, like people would, you
Mm-hmm.
know, nothing is adding up. You know, we have like, we're basically seeing the child traffickers, you know, running the world, and people are like, you know, all of the evidence has come out, and they're trying to put it all back under, but to no avail, because the more, you know, the more you try to conceal something, the more, you know, it comes out, and so nothing is adding up. So this is also, this is really the true math. You know, things need to add up, as you
Mm-hmm.
said. You know, Peter was you know, was this figure who, you know, was is the very found, you know, how, this is how we know it also. They take the right function in order to leverage it towards, you know, their upside down stuff. So they would take these big functions of the apostles, and then they would sort of, you know, there is, in another maybe conversation we can get into that, but they use these big functions but in the upside down. So that's, you know, see, that's where we know also that, you know, that Peter is the foundation and is the rock, and so, but then they use that, you know, in the upside down, and then
to to be the rock of the upside down church. And so
yes,
they need everybody else believing this program and this lie to keep the upside down church intact.
that's the whole thing. And but what we are doing now is uncovering, and as I said, you know, in a way that is fully internally consistent with itself. You know what I mean? How they used it. So, you know, this is why, you know, in a way, if you wish, and this is also, I am aware it's a big statement, but this marriage of the goat, it's important we started talk about this because what is happening right now is are the two raptures, and if I'm not mistaken, there's even mention of two raptures in the book of Revelation. It means that so one is creating these upside down selves, which is the upside down crucifixion, and one is the right side up one is to get via shadow work to the true self, which are these precious stones. The two raptures, in the dreams, they're like two whirlwinds, and they're, like the right whirlwind is mentioned in the Bible as the Jesus coming back on a cloud to fetch his people, and he pulls them into that whirlwind, which also in the book of Job said that this whirlwind appeared and the Lord spoke out of the whirlwind to him. So that whirlwind is like the stairway, and he's pulling the people up, and then you have the upside down one, which is pulling them into the black hole. And, as we said, a very, very huge part of the world has been pulled into that dark dimension, and we see it in the dreams, and so this is very, very important. The upside down crucifixion was literally to prepare the bride for the goat, which means, in fact, that the Roman Church is basically the program for the creation of tombstones. This is why I think it makes perfect sense, that what was speaking of today, and that is that they turned Peter upside down to build their upside down church on.
They turned his image or his likeness upside down, and they did the same thing with Jesus in a different way, but also turned him upside down into being shadowless, which was not at all his true teachings.
It goes really deep because they used the teaching of the inclusion of the shadow. They turned that in upside down, and then also they use the blood, to wash the blood of the lamb to wash off the shadow. So there is a part of that where those, getting into this deeper upside down version of the church, I would say that what we see at the superficial levels, is not the deeper thing. You go to church and you get the first layer of the washing. You learn, throw it all on Jesus, and they come out all blessed up and blessed up and not aware of the shadow of the Sunday church. But that's like the first level, and then you go deeper, and then for instance, when you go for instance, into masonry and stuff like that, the more secretive layers, that there we get that's also the church. That's also the church. A lot of people don't get it. People go Sunday to church, but they're also a member of that deeper, more secretive layer of the church. And there you get it much more blatantly. There you get, the blood. The blood is the theft. So this is also what we need to look at eventually. But the theft of the blood, you see, that's also another upside down aspect, is used to get access to that blood in this upside down way, is to then not have to wash away the shadow. So this is why, exactly, this is why we see that there's this, what is coming in the top, what is being revealed is that there's this huge cult mob, that runs child trafficking. We see it with Epstein, and they've gotten away with murder because, they've had upside down access to the blood.
So, each side of the controlled opposition likes to blame the other side and take credit for the unveiling and coming out of all this information about child trafficking and sexual abuse. But really, what's really happening is the truth is coming out, and the shadow's coming out and coming back, and that's how and why all of this truth is coming out. It has to. This is the end of the cycle, and everything has to come out now and be revealed. That is the meaning of the word apocalypse. It's gotten misused and misunderstood in terms of the end of the world, but it's really uncovering and unmasking and unveiling of what's been hidden.
If you see the latest movies, all of them are about time travel. and all of them are time travel to avoid apocalypse. So there's this new series, new is a new edition of the Umbrella Academy. So they're going back in time to change event to avoid the apocalypse. But the apocalypse is the return of the shadow, which is the end of the system, not the end of the world. That's where Jesus said, "No stone will remain unturned." And so, obviously, this whole idea of going back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, is to change the outcome, which is the compensation by the shadow, the big compensation, which is the apocalypse, which is actually the healing.
I was just going to say the other TV series, I think both on Netflix, Dark and Stranger Things, they both, well, one takes place in the 80s, and Dark, they have the cycles where they go back, and they're always trying to go back to change things or make something not happen, and it's all in service of avoiding the shadow. And also in those two series, not the Umbrella Academy, but in Dark and Stranger Things, there's also a nuclear power plant at the center of it, and that's really important too, because that's the self splitting, and that's symbolic that it opens these black holes collectively.
In Dark, it's very interesting because they go to this black hole, which is like the black sun, which is at the centermost core of the Nazi movement. They search for the black sun, and they think that if they find that they can change, go back and stop
Mm-hmm.
the apocalypse and all of that. So it really makes, the way it's just amazing how. But then again, not, because if you know Jungian psychology, they will eventually end up making a movie of themselves, because it's all
Mm-hmm.
in essence, the black hole is where we look for something totally outside that is inside. It's just going more and more outside of ourselves. Like, the whole idea of the black outer space thing is, the more you go into outer space, the more you will hit up on this portal, which is the black hole, because it's just going more and more out, while the right side work is going in. So when we, the right side up, so the marriage of the lamb is where you find the portal back to heaven. Heaven mean, of course, not in the monkish way that the
Mm-hmm.
church put it. The church created this monkish version of heaven, but it's much more a
And sinless,
exactly.
that one has to be perfect, without sin, without anything, and that's not be coming back whole, 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 coming back
Right.
whole in wholeness. That's not sinless. That's not the same thing at all.
No, because that's the whole point. Because this is why also they can get away with it, because they feel, we need to be sinless, and they've created this Jesus figure that was sinless, which is of course shadowless, which is just like the first layer of the upside
Mm-hmm.
down Christ figure, the Antichrist. To go back to the point that, so the apocalypse is the compensation of the system that has. You see, I've made a live recently where I said that the trias politica, which is like, the system we run in, which is parliament or Congress, and you have the executive, and then you have the judicial, that is in itself a way to hide the shadow. So our very system is based on the very same female-less trinity as the church. Three males and
Mm-hmm.
the three institutions, and it's built on, and the point would be that the return of the shadow would mean the end of this system that is based on hiding the shadow, and then what you get is, now they have the controlled opposition, which is the so-called people who are against the establishment, the so-called people who have woken up from the establishment, and they got, then it's like, Michael Jackson was speaking against the Illuminati or what have you, and then they kill him, and now they're saying, in the Simpsons that Trump will be assassinated, and now Trump has been sort of cast as the leader of this conspiracy opposition, who is on to, them. But then they're just, what they're doing is they're trying to do as if that controlled opposition conspiracy, shooters or whatever they call themselves, that they are that they are running the compensation by the
Hmm.
shadow. So they're trying to appropriate of the compensation of the shadow, to stop the very compensation or the apocalypse.
Yes, it's a way to try to control and manipulate and skew what's already actually happening and attribute it to specific groups or a specific person in a way to, again, to conceal and manipulate what's actually happening in a totally different way, because the shadow coming back isn't fighting anything, and that wasn't the message of Jesus 2000 years ago either, not to fight anything. Fighting outside doesn't help, it doesn't solve the problems. It really makes them stronger, but that doesn't mean that what's happening is okay either.
No, but you see, this is at the core of the control opposition. They want this other side to fight the so-called establishment or what have you. And then
Hmm.
because when you fight, it keeps you on this checkered board. It keeps you in this lockdown, because you're fighting something outside of yourself. It puts you in a reactive state, which is an outside in state, which is lockdown. And the whole way towards the self is, yeah, to move towards the self inwardly by elevating off of the checkered board, which is the right, walking on the sea or the floating. And this is what Jesus and Peter them left in code, if you wish. And for people, so that when we would come, we could explain this. This is why the true codes were still embedded in the metaphors and in the dreams and in the stuff in the Bible, because at the end, we would be able to show, we're not like fighting the church as such. We're fighting what they made of it, but we're saying that there is a true version of Christianity that is based on the self work and the shadow work. So it's very difficult. The control opposition will throw the whole thing away. They would go like, "Oh yeah, the church is corrupted and this and that," and
Hmm.
they would fight it. And we're saying no, they just turned it upside down, and we need to turn it right side up.
Yes,
And
which
not,
which I wouldn't which I wouldn't even call that so much fighting it. It's understanding it from the inside out, and trying to show what really happened and what is still happening.
no, and that is the thing. But where we are not some conspiracy control opposition group that is just fighting the system. Because we even say, that, or I say, to speak for myself, but I think, the control opposition is in of itself the very mechanism that is used to. So yeah, at a certain point, the very thing will start to fight itself as a way, to keep everybody in this reactive outside in
Yes.
mode. You know what I mean? And yeah, so that's what we're seeing now. The system is like fighting itself, and obviously the people in it, they think they're legitimately fighting something that is bad out there.
Yes.
But it's, you know what I mean. But the only way to get out of that checkered board game lockdown is to find self. So via shadow work, which is the inner the energetically inner path.
Yes. And and so, to get back to where our conversation started today, that that was the reason and the formula of using the first moment when the shadow is brought into awareness, finding ways of trying to get around that or get away from that. And so that's what they started instantaneously when Jesus's message and teachings about the shadow were first being introduced. Instantly trying to control and manipulate that information and turn it fully upside down in a way to not have to carry one's shadow. But in not such an obvious way that it's a satanic church or something. There truly are Church of Satan churches, and they hide it in such a way that it really is it really is evil genius, because they use enough truth and enough of the true message to make it believable. And then everyone attaches very strongly to religion. There's a lot of pressure from one's family and society, if you've grown up in a certain church, not to leave that church or not to question that church. And it's like cycles of abuse. But cycles of religion, people stay in the same religion and don't change and don't question and are really, really attached. And it is because it's a drug. And like you said, there are different superficial levels of avoiding the shadow by going to church and feeling good and blissed out and blessed out. And so that's a drug. And so if you start taking away someone's drug, there will be a lot of resistance and fight to that.
And there's this Netflix series that just came out. What's the name of it? Where they sort of this so-called cult which has existed since the beginning, and they feed off of children or something. Did you see that?
I don't think it was on Netflix. The Dr. Sleep, that one?
Yes.
So yes. So
Right.
Dr. Sleep it was a movie, and it's a sequel to The Shining, which they're both books written by Stephen King. So The Shining was a movie back, I think, in 1980. So this is a sequel to that, but it really doesn't have a whole lot in common with that original movie, because Dr. Sleep is where they show this ancient group of, they're not human, but they look like humans, but this ancient group who gets power and energy by killing and feeding off of children and their energy and their essence. And they specifically look for children with sort of psychic powers and psychic gifts, because they get more energy from them, and they kill them and devour them.
Well, and so that's the point when you said drug, right? So the first layer of the drug is how it helps people to cut their shadow off, and I used to work in a rehab, heavy addiction, and the first stop after the rehab was church. And it was trading the drug. It was trading the high. The church would give them what the drug did for them, the church would do, and that is to help them run away from their shadow. So it is the opium of the masses. And then but that's just the first layer, because then we spoke of this movie is showing that there is a deeper layer, which is where the deeper initiates, if you wish, and as we said, then you're getting into the more deeper, the secret layers of the church. They then get access to this essence of children and people, which is able to keep them, sort of immune to shadow compensation. They feel, in any case, it does that for a long time, but the cost of that is that's another discussion. But the point is that is the big drug, and you see, this is what we're seeing coming up. This is what is underlying the child sex trafficking and the trafficking of women, and the whole idea of these upside down crucifixion selves. It gives access to the this essence, which is the blood. This is how they've trafficked in the blood of the lamb, but then in the upside down. This is the big drug. I mean, listen, people will go and say, okay, so what are we talking about here? You mean, how can I wrap my mind around this? Because this is like way out there, this whole thing that's coming up with Epstein and the children and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And no, and it's not so out there because, for God's sake, already with the normal drugs like cocaine and what have you,
Or prescribed drugs.
yes,
Quote,
but
quote,
let's
legal drugs.
but exactly, but which is much bigger, which we know now is an organized form of the cartels, which traffic
Mm-hmm.
cocaine. But let's just say cocaine. 20% of the Western societies are consuming that. It's impossible to stop the trafficking of cocaine because of the demand. Okay, so I mean that's cocaine, right? Which is already, we know how big the cartels are because they have reorganized themselves into the big pharma cartel, which is the biggest power on the planet. But that is still just drugs that sort of, that's nothing compared with this drug. So imagine, if you can't even stop the cartels, you think you're going to stop this, which is the drug of the elite. You think you're going to stop child trafficking? I mean, you think it's not conceivable that it is, that there are routes, and that this thing is completely and fully structured and runs. And with Epstein, we just saw a little glimpse of this, that this is what these people at the top consume. And this movie of Stephen King is showing this in plain sight. But but he's showing it as, being this rogue group who,
Well,
lives.
it's shown as fiction too,
Right.
science fiction, horror, but that's real life. That's what's happening, and
Yes.
has been happening.
So when we're talking about the church, which is the biggest institution in the world, they have 6 billion followers, and we're saying they basically provide the biggest drug of all, at the deeper levels, which is the more secret layers of themselves. And that even at the shallow levels, this is all leveraged on Peter's blood, if you wish, So to maybe come back to wrap it up all, but I mean, this is big stuff because we're dealing here with the biggest drug, which is able to stop the very shadow. We're dealing with a world who is addicted to this drug. It's not like this system will say, hey, I realized, that the whole thing is wrong, let's change it. No. This is why the shadow, the return of the shadow is really rough because it has, and this is why the biggest concern is to put all of this stuff back under, to not let it come out. I mean, it's already in plain sight and people cannot see it.
It shakes up everything because aside from child trafficking and that kind of abuse, even in individual families, there's so much sexual abuse that's been hidden, that's been concealed, that's been washed away, the upside down washing it away. And it's sexual abuse is so incredibly prevalent, and that's even hard to open your eyes and see how widespread it is and has been generation after generation.
Exactly. That's what this is based on. And we know that they create societies that are very open for abuse. they feel they because this is all the first layers, of creating this whole thing, and so yeah, this is why it's fostered. And look, this is why when you look in the church, you find structurized abuse, sexual abuse of children, and Ratzinger ran because so much of the cesspool was ripped open, and they saw that this thing was something structural and organized. So he basically left office. This is a pope leaving office. People have very bad memories, but this was all out, and now again they're trying to put it all back under because it's out, and people can't see it because they remain in this lockdown state of the checkered board. If you're fighting this something, this other opposite out there, which you will project on, you will remain in a state that you're not able to see the bigger picture, and but it's all out, and they're trying to put it back under to no avail, because it will just come out worse, and the only way we will move forward is if we accept, this work of the shadow, and the people need to realize now, that there is two ways, either we go cut it all off and end up in this dark dimension, or we listen and really try to do this shadow work, and what is being offered, because we are in the thick of it. We are in the apocalypse in the sense of the compensation. Yeah, so this is why I think I'm very happy, Meredith, that we are doing these conversations. Because this stuff needs to get out, and people need to know that there is a way, out of
Yes.
people. Somebody asked me yesterday on Facebook, so how do we get out of this timeline, which is with this COVID. Everybody sees the COVID stuff
Hmm.
is basically, the way they're managing it is to push people off planets,
Yes.
you know,
Well, even
and they
even
ask
even
me,
even here in the United States, the fights about the disease, whether it's a real disease or made up, to wear a mask, not wear a mask, to be in quarantine or not, those are so divisive and dividing this country, and fueling, as I'm sure you're aware, the the amount of people getting the virus, because there's such division and such split in this country alone, that it's just incredible. And then that fighting and that divisiveness, it's a mob, and it just breeds more and more. And and it's about every single thing. And now the election's coming up, so there are Republican against Democrat, and every single thing. Black Lives Matter, blacks and whites, everything has been turned into a fight. And that, it starts on the inside when we're split on the inside, but it's being fueled by those who want everyone in that black hole.
yeah, because it's the blood. It's their so-called, shielding against the truth and themselves, and they will, so right, people need to know. There is, this lady was saying, how do I get off that, that timeline?
Hmm.
And yeah, there is a way off, but it's not fighting anything, but it's just doing the,
Up the stairway.
yes, it's up the stairway, that's it. And and we are providing that, for, so this stairway work, which is the very whirlwind, which is what is the right rapture. And we're so deep in it that we need to speak this now. There's no
Yes.
more time to, yeah, this is the way, this is the right rapture out of, because the timeline that goes on to check out, to move out of body, off planet, they will end. They're ending up in a very dark dimension, which is death. Which is
Mhm.
really the end. And so, right. So we need to maybe stop for now, but we will
Yes.
continue. Yeah, we will continue these conversations.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.